My name is Jason Okoye, and I will be sharing my testimony regarding Shincheonji in relation to my life. Shincheonji has become my family, but before I get ahead of myself, I want to talk about my experiences growing up in Africa and moving to the United States. I grew up in a very poor and religious family in the most southern part of West Africa. Nevertheless, I was a very happy kid. I spent a lot of my nights outside in the porch with my grandmother, telling me tales about the great creators of the stars that lit up the night sky. I trusted in my grandmother's words because she always took care of me. My mother often worked during the weekends and the week as well, so I rarely got to see her. And my father, well, he was abroad, so he was out of the picture. As a child, I often woke up early in the mornings to help my grandmother set up the firewood while my other cousins helped her prep and cook. Back then, I hated the early morning sun because it always reminded me of the great distance we had to travel to fetch water. These were often needed for cooking and bathing as well. You see, I share these memories not to beg for empathy, but rather it is to reminisce on the great memories I had growing up in Africa. One day we walked all the way to the hillside to fetch water. I was so tired that day from the scorching sun, so I playfully spilled the water on my cousins as I felt my bucket was too heavy. They chased me all the way home and we all got in trouble for wasting water. I was only 6 back then, so we all laughed. As time passed, I realized the value of water and why I was made to work so hard at such a young age. It was because my grandmother understood the drought periods and wanted to prepare for it. Through my experience with fetching water, I learned the purpose of working as a family. Halfway through middle school, I was made to move across the world. Like an obedient child, I complied. I left everything behind: my family, my friends, even my beliefs. Moving to the United States was very different. See, people spoke differently, they ate different foods and worshiped different gods. I had always been curious about God from a young age, but the difference between then and now is that now I could finally make my own conclusions about God instead of believing in tales about the creators of the cosmos without reasoning. It was harder to first try to understand God's will because I never spent time reading the Bible. When I finally began, I was even more confused than before. I struggled to understand the words of the Bible and its context. It was like reading different language. I quickly perceived that a lot of us are brought up to believe, or at least know about God, the Christian God that is. But can we all honestly say that we understand everything written in the Bible? Many pastors I consulted, but at this point, they all told me that we were not meant to understand the Bible fully. I wondered why we were given those parts of the Bible if we are not to understand them. I was hopeless at this point, so I resorted to prayer. I begged God to help me to understand Him. For so long, nothing happened. So I continued to go to church and heard the same sermon again and again and again about how God loved me. I even began to question if God really loved me. I was so confused because I knew God was real but had no way of understanding Him. I had a great group of people at my campus ministry who were loving and understanding and taught me the history of the Bible. But something was still missing. They were not able to teach me about the prophetic parts of Scripture. It was not until I stumbled upon Shincheonji that I began to logically understand the Bible. It really breaks my heart, the things that are said about this organization. My experience has been nothing but delight, joy, and growth. But people from my previous church, they began to persecute me because I wanted to understand the Bible as Shincheonji. Many people said that this organization brainwashes people, but that is incorrect. Indoctrination is actually forcing someone to accept your words without reasoning or questioning. And this is not how my experience with Shincheonji unfolded. Rather, this was my experience with my pastors prior to Shincheonji. They were good people, but were too prideful to admit that they themselves did not fully understand the pivotal parts of Scripture. So instead, they told me that the Bible was not meant to be understood fully. With this in mind, I left to seek answers elsewhere. And when I did find answers, I thought they would be happy for me, but rather they began to persecute me. It is not wise to base our opinions and discriminate what we do not understand. It is so unfair how the people of Shincheonji are treated now, especially by the ones we love the most. We are no longer regarded as people. Our right to worship God peacefully has been stripped away. We have no privacy, and we fear for our lives. No human should be treated like this. I share this testimony because I want people to have an unbiased perspective of Shincheonji. This is a perspective that is not driven by emotion or tainted by lies and fear, but rather a perspective that is driven by logic and truth. Many people have heard the perspective of those who are not a part of Shincheonji. It is only fair to hear the side of those who are within Shincheonji and how we are treated daily. I will continue to live as a faithful believer. I do not hate or harbor any wickedness towards those who persecute and slander us. I simply want to live in a world where there is religious freedom. It says in Romans chapter 12, verse 17 to 21, that we shouldn't repay any evil for evil. Instead, be careful to do what is right. Thank you all for listening.